For new entrepreneurs, one of the most common ways it shows up is undervaluing their services or their products. We can really struggle in the beginning to price ourselves accordingly. We like to underprice ourselves, first of all, believing that, well, who's going to want to buy from me?
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Scale Smart, Grow Fast podcast. Many entrepreneurs unknowingly carry unhealed trauma that affects their business, showing up in their leadership, sales, marketing, and even daily operations. In this episode, Amy Lloyd, a trauma recovery coach and business mentor, reveals how past wounds can lead to burnout, misalignment, and growth roadblocks, and what to do about it. If you're ready to scale your business in a way that energizes rather than exhausts you, this conversation is a must listen. Amy, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm great, Harley. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, tell us a little bit more about your background. What got you to this point where you're helping business owners show up and, heal these traumas that maybe they don't even know about?
Well, it's very much a calling, not something I necessarily set out to do. I felt like I was very much led one step at a time. And it all started with my own healing journey. I went through my own traumas throughout my entire life, honestly, but I never identified with the words trauma or abuse. Those were things that happened to other people, right? Those were the things, like horrific things you see on the nightly news. That wasn't my life. And years ago, my mom disowned me. And so that just hit me like a soul level earthquake, as you can imagine. And I was completely baffled. Wait, how does something like that happen? I mean, that would be like if everything just started floating upward and like gravity ceased to exist. How is it even possible? And so as I was, ironically, right at that same time, I was already enrolled to become a life coach. I already was feeling that calling, right? But then in my personal life, as I was cleaning up the mess and figuring out what just happened, what's going on, I discovered the word trauma. And the fact that it means so much more than I realized it meant. And the more I learned, the more I educated myself, the more I was like, oh my gosh, my clients need this. By that point, I was already seeing life coaching clients. And so I realized that this was the missing link in our work together. So I started just consuming everything I could get my hands on, books, little digital courses, everything, podcasts, and doing my own extensive research. And I started referring to myself as the trauma-informed life coach. And the more I dug into it, it's like, there's got to be a more formal training for this. There has to be. I have since found others, but there's one, there's only one that I would actually recommend. And it's like a graduate level training. It's actually mind blowing in and of itself. And I became a certified trauma recovery coach. Well, parallel to all of that, it just so happened the clients that I was working with, almost all of them happened to be entrepreneurs. Don't know how that happened. That's just what I attracted somehow. And so I was helping them in their business below the surface, right? Doing that subconscious work, which ironically, I was only able to recognize these things in retrospect. This wasn't planned. And so I was able to look back over my own life. When I was in my early 20s, I started my first business and I was kind of horrified when I realized, oh my gosh, I'm a business owner because I grew up in poverty. And so part of that, a very common poverty story is that business people are bad. Anyone that makes money is bad. They only get what they have because they stand on the backs of people like us. And that's why we have nothing. And so when I was in my early 20s as a single mom, just trying to figure out how to pay the bills, and I realized suddenly I had a business. I was just trying to, clean houses to pick up a few bucks, but it turned into the full-time thing. And so I thought, oh my gosh, am I a bad person? Have I crossed the line somewhere without realizing it? And then I realized, okay, well, if I have a business, I have to market. Oh my gosh. And there's the M word, right? The, marketing and advertising that's so slimy and sleazy and pushy. And I went into a full-blown existential crisis over the whole thing, thinking that I have crossed some invisible line, and how did I become that person? And it took time, but I was able to work through it and realize, okay, that's not what those words mean. Yes, some people can choose slimy, sleazy marketing tactics and sales tactics, but that is a choice and I can choose differently. And so I poured my heart into my business. I poured my heart into my marketing. And so jump ahead 20 years. Here I am as a trauma recovery coach and a life coach. And that's what I help other entrepreneurs do. I help them work through a lot of those same blocks around money and marketing and sales.
It sounds like some of those could be like shadow beliefs. Is that like another word for it? I've heard of just like, things that you tell yourself that are maybe subconsciously that are holding you back and you don't even realize it. And it could just be from, you kind of mentioned the upbringing, whether that was a traumatic event or just the people around you, the way they talk about certain things that can really limit your future growth.
Shadow belief is a perfect phrase for it. It's all these things that live in the shadows that we're not aware of because we can't see them. We don't want to see them. We think we're not ready to see them, but once they start popping up in our face and in day-to-day life, it's almost like our subconscious poking us on the shoulder, hey, you're ready now, take a look. And so that's where I come in and help shine a flashlight, but with the person so that they're not navigating it on their own, because it can be quite scary. It can bring you to your knees sometimes. And it's really nice to have a guide who's been there.
Well, speaking of that, being the guide, you take a unique approach to helping these business owners and focusing on how unhealed trauma affects entrepreneurship. How do these deep wounds show up in day-to-day business operations, and what's the first step in addressing them?
For new entrepreneurs, one of the most common ways it shows up is undervaluing their services or their products. We can really struggle in the beginning to price ourselves accordingly. We like to underprice ourselves, first of all, believing that, well, who's going to want to buy from me? Especially when it's a very personal service, right? But it's really true, even if it's not such a personal service or even if it's a product, we still put that belief into the pricing. Who's going to want to buy from me? What do I really have to offer? Because I'm new. I'm just getting started. I haven't proven myself yet. But then also they want to undercut the market, not realizing that that's going to create drag on the whole market, or can over time, but also it undervalues what they're doing. They're telling everybody, okay, if the market is X and I'm way down here, what they think they're saying is, hey, I'm making myself available to the people who can't afford the market value, right? But what they're actually communicating is, I'm not worth it. Why would you ever want to buy from me? And so we work through some of those things. Self-sabotage is another really common one at all stages of business growth, and imposter syndrome. And it's amazing that people can be successful entrepreneurs for years and years and years and still struggle with imposter syndrome.
Can you talk a little bit more about the imposter syndrome? Like, what are some of the effects of that, or how might someone who maybe thinks they might have it self-identify, and see like, hey, is this something that maybe I need to talk to you more about?
If people find themselves doing things, questioning the value of whatever they are creating or have created, that's imposter syndrome. Now, it's good to take an honest look, right? We need to take an honest look at ourselves and also what we're doing and what we're creating. But is it coming from a place of curiosity or is it coming from a place of fear? That's the distinction. Usually, or it's often coming from a place of fear. And that's the telltale sign that there's something deeper here to look at and to try to start teasing apart and separating, okay, what is business stuff and what is my personal stuff that I need to make space for in my own time to address. Imposter syndrome can also pop up like procrastination. That's another common one, but we will procrastinate because of the imposter syndrome. We're afraid of being seen. We're afraid of being heard. We will spin in circles. We will work ourselves to death, putting in so many hours on the marketing because we know we need to market to attract clients, but we will self-sabotage ourselves the entire way because we're afraid of actually being seen and heard in our marketing because of that underlying imposter syndrome.
People might be spending hours tweaking little things behind the scenes that don't really move the needle, instead of just doing the thing they know they need to do, just pick up the phone and call the lead or call the client and have the conversation, right?
And also taking imperfect action every day, whatever that might look like. But I really want to hone in on the phrase imperfect action because there's no such thing as perfect, first of all, but also it's momentum. You're creating momentum. And part of what it means to be an entrepreneur is that you are constantly tweaking as you go because it's a learning process. And so bringing in that learning mindset, that childlike mindset where you're just eager to learn. Ooh, what am I going to learn in my business today? What am I going to learn about myself, about my business, about my clients? And allowing yourself to be expansive and open and excited and curious. That is one of the best ways to overcome that imposter syndrome is, first of all, just being aware of it, making space for it in your own time to work on it, but then also to bring in that expansive energy of curiosity and learning mindset into your business every day and taking those imperfect actions, knowing that you're going to learn, and you're going to tweak and you're going to take another imperfect action.
Are there any kind of habits or tips that you can recommend people to get in the habit of taking these imperfect actions and being open to these opportunities that will come from that?
It's a little oversaturated in the media for good reason, but I really just can't overstate the power of a gratitude practice of some sort. And the reason is, it's overstated in the media because it works. Now, some things we just get burned out hearing about. It's like, oh, it's so simplified. It sounds so stupid. It's just this cheesy little woo woo thing. But no, gratitude practice works because it's that counteraction to the fear, right? It's the fear that has us stuck in imposter syndrome or whatever we happen to be stuck in. But bringing in gratitude helps us see, okay, I have this fear and it's that both and. How do I create capacity and space for the and? And what do I want the and to look like? What is it that I wish I had in my life? And how can I find evidence that it already exists? So there's that confirmation bias. When we live in fear, well, guess what? We're going to find plenty of evidence to back up the fact that, well, there are things to be afraid of. Well, the converse is also true. There's plenty already in place. No matter what your existence is, no matter what your external reality is, you can still find plenty to be joyful over. I hear birds outside my window singing right now, and that just makes my heart sing. No matter where you are, at some point in the day, chances are you can hear a bird sing or something. There's always going to be something. The sky is blue right now. That also makes my heart sing. And so just finding some sort of gratitude practice, and even if it's just a few seconds a day, it helps soften that fear.
I think you may have alluded to this a little bit in what you were just talking about. You help a lot of business owners align their business with their purpose. What are some common misalignments that you see, and how can people help? What actions can they take to start aligning their business with their purpose?
Part of that alignment, a common part, goes back to my original fears of what words like business and marketing and sales mean, because I was taught that they mean these terrible things. And so many of my clients have those same fears or similar fears, but they feel like they have been taught, well, this is just what it looks like. This is just what you have to do. Also working too much. Entrepreneurs especially are guilty of putting in far too many hours and living these imbalanced lifestyles. And I've had so many entrepreneurs tell me, well, that's just the reality of being an entrepreneur. And I'm like, yeah, I don't do that. I refuse. I'm the stubborn one. I'm going to find a way to have my cake and eat it too. And that's what I teach them to do.
Well, I'm glad you touched on burnout. Many entrepreneurs experience burnout, and often they don't realize the root cause. What patterns do you see in business owners who struggle with exhaustion? And how might delegation, including like using a virtual assistant, help break that cycle?
Delegation is a big conversation that I have a lot. A lot of times people, especially entrepreneurs, we tend to be go-getters. There's this underlying pattern of being the caretaker in some way, of being the provider, of being the one that holds it all together, that carries the weight for everyone around them, but never asks for help because, well, either there's no one in their life that can help or will help, or they have been taught that they don't deserve to help. That was my story. I was taught that I'm not allowed to ask for help, but I was expected to take care of everybody else's everything. And so that's a very common story with entrepreneurs. And so that delegation piece, honestly, it can mark a huge pivotal moment in a client's healing journey to get to the point where they are able to delegate. And it can be terrifying at first to offload that task and trust that it's going to be done. And also to understand that, you know what, the VA is human too. They're going to misunderstand things. They're going to drop balls just like we do, just like we all do. And learning to meet them with grace and practice real-time communication skills that they may not have had before. So actually that delegation is wonderful healing practice for people because it really touches on a lot of different pillar points.
Every day, your top performers are buried under emails, scheduling, and reporting. Work that doesn't move the needle. The result? Frustration, burnout, and worst of all, lost revenue. That's why we created the Executive's Guide to Scaling High Performers, a simple, battle-tested framework to eliminate busy work and unlock your team's full potential. Inside, you'll get the exact steps top executives use to retain A players, boost productivity, and free up their team for high-impact work. Stop losing revenue. Go to workergenics.com/growth hub or check the episode notes to download the Executive's Guide to Scaling High Performers Now. You mentioned something that I was kind of thinking, and it's a lot of these business owners hesitate to get the help because they feel like they should be able to do it all. What would you say to people who think, hey, I can't let go, I should be able to do this all? Maybe they've got that limiting belief of like, if they start hiring people, they get into that camp of the bad business owners that are exploiting people. How do you get over that?
There's a phrase, stop shooting all over yourself. I think that we all do that in our own ways. And I use an analogy of a camera aperture. When the aperture is really small, that's all you can see is, well, I should be able to do all of these things. And again, with that confirmation bias, they're going to look out into the world and they're going to find plenty of evidence, or so they think, of other people doing all the things. So let's expand that aperture. Let's zoom out and take a bigger picture. The people that you see doing all the things, are they really, or do they have their own VAs, for example, their own teams that you don't see because that's not what they're putting all over their social? The most successful people have teams. They do delegate. And that's a really important part of scaling, right? There's only so much that we can do on our own. And frankly, I don't think anyone becomes an entrepreneur with the grand dreams of working 80 hours a week, or even 50 or 60. Many of us become entrepreneurs with the grand dreams of working less. And so the only way we can do that is to bust through the glass ceilings that we put in place.
Boundaries are critical for wellness and sustainability in business. How can business owners set better boundaries in their work and have that work-life balance that they probably started out into getting into that business on why they started it?
Yeah. So the boundary piece, that's one of the first foundational pieces that I work with probably all clients on, is that we all have either wishy-washy boundaries, porous boundaries, or just maybe no boundaries with ourselves and also our expectations from others. And we wonder why we're so burned out. We wonder why we're so exhausted, or why we're angry, or why we're hurt all the time. We wonder, why does everybody walk all over me? It's because we haven't learned how to have boundaries. Those are really hard lessons, can be really painful lessons in the beginning, because we're unlearning so much programming from our families, potentially, certainly from society, and having to relearn new programming on the fly. Maybe I shouldn't use the word programming, but it's like a rewiring of our brain, little literal rewiring of our brain. And so that's what I mean by programming, is the neural programming. And so there's a lot of physiology going behind that, obviously, to rewire the brain, but there's also a lot of emotional work that it's going to kick up. Because, well, why wasn't I taught this stuff to begin with? And there's always that feeling of having been lied to. And it could be, sometimes that's the reality, but a lot of times the reality is that the people who taught us just didn't know. Yeah. And, society in general, they just don't know. And so we're taught what people know, and a lot of times it's misinformation. And here we are kind of playing mop-up crew in our own life to unlearn those old messages that never really felt right to begin with, and to learn to trust. And this is a big part of the boundary issue, is learning to trust ourselves, learning to connect with our own authenticity and intuition, and learning to trust that. And then learning to communicate that with others, and then learning to maintain it, because we're going to get pushback, especially in the beginning, because everybody that knows us to be a certain way. And so here we are being more assertive, more communicative, and stating boundaries. And people are like, whoa, what's happening right now? And so they'll push back. And then some of those people might fall away, and some of those people might get on board and be like, okay, there's a new version of you. I got it now.
What are some example, maybe system strategies or like technology tools that can help, once someone has committed to having these boundaries, to continue to enforce them and make them seem natural to those around them?
Consistency is key, and really getting clear on your messaging. So there's the person, right? But then there's you, the entrepreneur, your business, and also communicating your boundaries through your business, not just in your life in a general sort of way, but in your business with your clients. So if you make a decision to not issue refunds, for example, then stick to that. That's got to be true for everybody, no matter what. If there are going to be times when you issue a refund, then be clear about that. So transparency is really key there. and just telling people up front what is what and then sticking to that. That's a really good boundary example that entrepreneurs might struggle with because they might have a no refund policy, for example, but then somebody tells them, a story that just tugs at their heartstrings and so then they give a refund and it's like, okay, well, that's not really fair to the last guy you said no to. And so just being clear with yourself, being clear in your messaging. And again, falling back on your team. Who's your team? If you're not at a point yet where you can afford to hire out, you still have a team, even if they're not actively working in your business. So identifying who that team is, who are the people in your life that have your back? Who are the people that you go to after a hard day's work just to unload? So being clear on that. But then once you are able to delegate and outsource, then being really clear with your team, what your expectations are of them, how you're going to handle things when stuff does go sideways and knowing that it's going to go sideways and that's okay. That's part of the process, but just having those boundaries in place and sticking to them.
We talked about these unexpected situations that come up that can cause people to maybe push the boundaries that they've set a little bit. And sometimes that can cause overwhelm and uncertainty. What's one simple business practice that you recommend people have to help them create more ease and clarity in their day-to-day operations, given that there are going to be unexpected events that come up that might cause some stress?
Planning and also removing human error or the option for human error as much as possible. So automating as much as you can, using templates, stop reinventing the wheel. Entrepreneurs are so good at inventing wheels. I sometimes, teasingly call them, what is it? A Cartwright that makes the wheels that goes on the carts. And so if you have to do something, the same process repeatedly, do it once to create that template. And then it's just plug and play next time. That's going to save you hours in the office. You don't need to be there reinventing wheels all the time. A lot of time what's going on when we do that is avoidance. We're avoiding deeper internal things. And so we will come in and not make templates and we will reinvent the wheel every time. So removing that will save you a lot of time relying on templates. That also helps too, because depending on what we're doing, we might not always be in the mindset to be able to show up and create on demand, for example. And so if we have a template, then when we come in feeling a little more brain dead that day, we can still just do the plug and play rather than reinventing the wheel for the millionth time. And automating. How can we automate? I'm always on the lookout for ways to automate everything, schedule out everything in advance. I also have a podcast. A lot of podcasters I know will record podcasts the same week that they are publishing it. Man, I could never. That just would not work for me. I'm a batcher. And so I really encourage people to batch, whatever that might look like for them. Find areas throughout your business where you can batch whatever it is that you're doing. And also repurposing content. So I'm really good at getting in there and you can take the same piece of content and repurpose it in 20 different ways, but also reusing it again later because if you use it in a year, it's new for the first time all over again. Because a lot of people don't really feel comfortable with that. They're like, oh, I'm saying the same thing. Yes, that's the point because people didn't hear it as many times as you said it, but they do need to hear it repeatedly. So that's actually a good thing. It's a win-win situation. So those are some quicker ways that I really suggest people look into batching and automation and creating templates to alleviate their time and also allow for those days where maybe their brain's not hitting on all cylinders.
Yeah, I love it. Those are things that we really emphasize as well in our business and help support our clients do because in addition to helping just make the day-to-day go smoother, it allows the business to scale faster. When you get to that point where you've got more customers coming in, you need to hire more people to help. You already have all the SOPs, the templates, the procedures, and the automation. So the learning curve for the next hire is a lot lower and they can hit the ground running so much faster. It makes it easier for everyone. I love how you mentioned like eliminating errors. Like, yeah, I mean, if you're going to have humans, there's going to be errors, and using the technology and the processes just makes it so much easier to eliminate those things and keep things simple.
Big time. I have discovered ChatGPT over the past year and I'm just having so much fun with ChatGPT and that's one way I have implemented to start to go even further with eliminating human errors. Just, it's almost like having another brain
Yeah.
to get another perspective and it points out things that I miss and that's really helpful.
So before we wrap up, if an entrepreneur is feeling stretched thin and overwhelmed today, what's the first thing that you recommend they do to try to get back on track?
Breathe. Again, such a simple thing, but it can't be overstated. One thing that many of us don't realize is that we have very shallow breath and we don't even know it, or we will even hold our breath and have no idea that we're doing it. We'll do that a lot in our sleep too. That can jar us awake. If you ever wake up in the middle of the night with a touch of panic, sometimes it can be because you weren't breathing. And it could be a medical thing, but a lot of times, whether it is or is not a medical thing, there can also be some underlying trauma going on there that's coming up subconsciously when we sleep. But just taking a deep breath and being really mindful when you take that deep breath to have a longer exhale than inhale, because that tells your nervous system, I am safe. The more we can communicate to our nervous system, I am safe, even saying it in your head out loud, even just saying that I am safe every day to yourself can over time retrain your nervous system to know that it's safe. And what that does is it brings in capacity so that we can hold that both and, like I was talking about, so that we can become aware, first of all, of any fear that we might be carrying, but also bring in capacity to hold that and. Okay, there is fear and there is joy. There's fear and there can still be peace.
Thank you so much for sharing these actionable strategies and tips to help people have that balance, have the boundaries, and be well in their business. If people want to continue the conversation with you and learn more about how you might be able to help them in their business, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
There are two ways. They can go to my website, ascensionwellnesslife.com. They can also find me on Facebook under Amy Lloyd, and also in my Facebook group, Thriving Entrepreneurs, where I support people with things just like this.
Awesome. And to our listeners out there, if you got value from this episode, do one quick thing. Hit the like and subscribe buttons so you don't miss future strategies to help you scale smarter. And do you know a business owner or colleague who could use this? Share this episode with them. It could be exactly what they need right now. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, leave us a quick star rating. It helps us reach more leaders just like you. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.